I destroyed my relationship for a fling, lost everything I didn't realize I had, and now regret it more than I can ever say. All right, here goes. I need to get this out of my head because it's all I think about lately. I know I made a series of disastrous decisions, and the irony is, if you asked me a year ago, I would have told you I hadn't done anything wrong, that I deserved a break from the grind. Now I understand how blind I was, and the fog only lifted once everything completely fell apart. Oliver and I had been together for 7 years, married for almost a decade. He was my rock, the one person I knew would always stand by me no matter what. We started out madly in love, and at first he gave me the sense of security I craved. I'll admit, I became entitled to it. He was caring, supportive, and just always there. Looking back, I realized that stability was a rare blessing, but back then, I started to see it as mundane. I wanted excitement, passion, and I began to blame Oliver for not keeping things alive in my mind. I created this fiction where I convinced myself that he was the reason I felt trapped, like he'd somehow manipulated me into a life of routine. And then, just as if fate had planned it, Liam showed up. Liam was flashy, charismatic, the kind of guy who made everything feel exhilarating again. I got pulled into this whirlwind of feeling seen and alive in ways I hadn't experienced in a long time. With Liam, I felt desired, and I convinced myself that I hadn't felt that way in years. Instead of questioning what I could do to reinvigorate my marriage, I embraced this illusion, thinking it was exactly what I was missing. When the affair started, I felt like a teenager again, sneaking around, lying to Oliver, and feeling some strange thrill. My flawed logic was so distorted. I told myself that this was my time, that I deserved excitement for once, that Oliver would understand if he truly cared about me. And worse, I told myself that it wouldn't hurt him because he didn't have to know. It wasn't long before the guilt started creeping in, though. Even if I wouldn't admit it to myself, I began pulling away from Oliver, distancing myself both emotionally and physically. It was easier than confronting the mess I was making. But Oliver was patient, always asking if I was okay, if there was something he could do to help. He noticed, of course, but I kept brushing him off, claiming I was just tired or stressed from work. It was almost as if I wanted him to feel like he was the problem, just so I could keep justifying what I was doing. But then things changed. Oliver came to me one evening, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He asked if there was something I wanted to tell him. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't thought he'd actually suspect anything. I was so careful, or so I thought. I scrambled to deny it, and he didn't press me any further that night. But that was the moment I should have known my illusion was crumbling. A few days later, he served me divorce papers. No yelling, no big argument, just a simple matter-of-fact request for a divorce. He told me he knew about Liam, and that while he still loved me, he couldn't be with someone who couldn't be honest with him. That moment, I can't even describe it. It was like everything crashed in on me at once. He didn't try to save the marriage. He didn't even ask me to explain myself. And that's when it hit me. I had taken him for granted so deeply that I assumed he would always be there, that he would tolerate anything because he loved me. In the following days, I was in shock. I begged him to reconsider, that we could work on it, that it was just a phase. I even tried to blame him for letting the marriage get stale, for not being passionate enough. But the look in his eyes told me everything. He was done. He simply said he loved me too much to stay in a situation where I didn't value him. As I packed my things and moved out, I realized I'd lost everything. The days after I left Oliver were a blur. I couldn't focus, couldn't think clearly. The pain of losing him, of losing everything I thought I could take for granted, was suffocating. I had spent so long in my own head, convincing myself that I was entitled to something more, that I deserved a change. I never stopped to think about what I was truly throwing away. The reality of it all began to set in. Oliver wasn't just my husband, he was my partner, my best friend, the one person who had always been there for me, even when I took him for granted. I couldn't see what I had until it was gone. Now I understand just how deep my mistake was. I started staying in a small apartment. It was empty, both physically and emotionally. I couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness, like I was trapped in a cage of my own making. Liam didn't feel the same anymore. The excitement that had once seemed so intoxicating now felt shallow, like a fragile illusion I had built to escape the reality of what I had destroyed. I realized that the excitement was just a distraction, a temporary fix to fill the void I hadn't even acknowledged. The more I thought about it, the more I understood how wrong I had been. Liam was never going to be the answer to my problems. The fantasy I had created around him was just that, a fantasy, a brief moment of escape from the truth. With him, I thought I was finally getting what I wanted, but all I had really done was lose myself further. And Oliver, he haunted my every thought. He wasn't just a memory, he was a constant presence in my mind. I kept imagining him, his smile, his kindness, the way he always knew what I needed without me saying a word. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about what we had, about how much I had taken it all for granted. It was like a wave of regret crashing over me that never let up. Every day, I woke up with the weight of my choices hanging over me. I tried reaching out to Oliver a few times. I sent him messages, left him voicemails, desperately hoping for some kind of response. But with every attempt, I felt the distance between us growing, a space I couldn't bridge anymore. I was the one who had pushed him away, and now, I was the one trying to pull him back. But I knew deep down, I had no right to expect him to come back. But he didn't respond. He didn't even give me the chance to apologize. And deep down, I knew why. I had failed him. I had failed us. He had tried for so long to make things work, and I had refused to see it until it was too late. One day I drove by our old house. The memories came rushing back so fast it was like I was reliving them. The times we laughed together, the quiet moments that we shared, the life we had built. It was all right there in front of me, reminding me of everything I had lost. I parked my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the house. I wished I could go back, to undo the damage I had done, to erase the pain I had caused, but I couldn't. I had destroyed it all and there was no going back. I made a choice, and that choice was final. It wasn't just a decision to leave him, it was a decision to lose him forever, and now I had to live with the consequences. I never thought I would lose him. I never thought I would lose the only person who had always been there for me, the one who never gave up on us. But it happened, and now I have to live with that reality, even though it feels like a weight that will never leave me.